Hello. The name of our program, Time, has returned to the air. The majority of television viewers had never rejected it. When turning on their sets, everyone nonetheless said, let's watch the time. But for confidence, we asked the Sociological Department of Ostankino to conduct a survey, and more than half asserted their desire to return that name of the program, the staff of the station as well, because Time is a name which reflects the essence of our work. The times define the program. We're a mirror of your current day. So, as usual, now about the main events of the day. All force ministers returned from Chechen to Moscow. The Prime Minister of Russia announces readiness to meet with Dudayev to resolve the Chechen crisis. President Yeltsin met with the Vice President of the United States, Albert Gore. Moscow rejects the plan of regularization offered by the leader of the Bosnian Serbs, Karadzic. We just received news that a group of members of the Security Council is conducting a meeting. It's being held behind closed doors. Nothing else is known. And during the course of the day, several important Itartas telegrams arrived from Chechnya. Jahar Dudayev gave his forces the order to cease fire and withdraw by 1 kilometer from the line of contact with Russian troops. Later, as expected, the statement of the president of Chechnya followed, in which it suggested that combat activity be ceased, that Russian troops be withdrawn from the territory of Chechnya, and without any preliminary conditions begin talks on the highest level possible. Later, information agencies reported that the Vice Premier Nikolai Yegorov was urgently called to Moscow, and also all force ministers returned to Moscow, Pavel Grachov, Viktor Yerin and Sergei Stepashin. And now in detail about how events unfolded in Chechnya. According to information arriving from the zone of the Chechen conflict, in the dramatic situation which developed in the last days around Grozny, certain improvements were finally noted. And they're connected foremost with yesterday's address of Boris Yeltsin to the residents of the Chechnya Republic. I'll remind you that it contains another appeal to cease fire and sit at the dialogue tables without any preconditions. The President of Russia again extended by 48 hours the deadline for voluntary relinquishing of arms and to cease resisting law enforcement forces. It's fully understandable to forcefully silence all weapons. Blaring in Chechnya today is not simple. This is approximately 100 tanks, combat vehicles, 150 artillery and shell installations, and 50,000 units of firearms. It won't be easy to overcome barriers in relations which surfaced the feeling of revenge and suspicion as well. Although today everyone in Russia hopes that in the end common sense should triumph and not senseless bloodshed. This conclusion is being drawn by those who yesterday shot their own compatriots, Russians, in military uniforms. According to news from Grozny this morning in the suburbs of the city, several armed clashes occurred between groups of local people who have come to their senses, who have decided to return to their villages, and brazen gunmen who intend to stand to the end. It seems that certain changes occurred in the position of the Chechen leadership as well. At 3 o'clock, Jahar Dudayev gave orders to his forces to cease fire and withdraw by 1 kilometer from the line of contact with Russian forces, but advised to carefully watch the adversary and, if he attempts to move forward, to open fire. In Dudayev's orders, there are alternative options dictated by doubts in the sincerity of Moscow's actions. According to reports from Chechnya, among the regular citizens who by will of fate or by deception were involved in war, the question of surrendering weapons is no less intense, and not because they don't know where to surrender their weapons, although 30 points have been set up to receive them. If previously an attribute of the mountain Cossacks was the dagger, then lately, under the pretext of defending honor and dignity, it's been replaced by cannons and grape-shot type hail projectile systems. I'll add that all these weapons ended up in Chechnya through various channels, but most important, unlawfully. And as the tragic events have demonstrated, it only worsened the already volatile situation near the conflict. As I've already said, the Prime Minister of Russia announced readiness to meet with Dudayev in order to resolve the Chechen crisis, but will not postpone the date of his official visit to India, which is scheduled for the 21st of December. This, a correspondent of Itartas learned from well-informed sources within the government of Russia. And hence, if the talks do occur, they must be held no later than the beginning of next week. In the Federative Council and in the State Duma of Russia, today they also spoke about methods to resolve the Chechen crisis, although not only about that, details from our correspondents. An unscheduled session of the Federative Council began with the election of the 19th last member of the Constitutional Court. Only the court can give a legal assessment to the Chechen events. The discussion of the candidacy, the president had recommended to that post the aide to the head of his administration, Robert Seville, was quite quick and he was not endorsed. That means that the Constitutional Court, as previously, can't begin to function. During the break, the chairman of the chamber acquainted journalists with his plan to regularize the Chechnya situation. Vladimir Shumeka offers to immediately cease fire and simultaneously begin withdrawing Russian troops and disarming Chechen formations. The Republic must be prepared for the free expression of the will of the citizens to conduct elections in order that it should return to constitutionality and lawfulness. Against expectations, the session on the Chechen problem was open. There's nothing to hide. All is clear anyway, said Aksarbek Galazov. Incidentally, it turned out that not everything was clear to everyone. Deputies had hoped the situation would be clarified by the force ministers and other responsible figures of high rank invited to the meeting, but some couldn't come and some sent their secondary deputies. Vladimir Shumeka voiced his view that he was not surprised by this in any way. If there is no legal responsibility to show up, then it's not surprising that no one came to take the heat for everyone else. Yet the deputies decided to invite the Prime Minister to the session when he has the time. The deputy, Tikhamirov, said that a plan to resolve the crisis will be impossible for the Federative Council to develop. Therefore, at least one must give a political assessment of events. Incidentally, today the resolution about the situation in Chechnya was not adopted after all. The observing mission of the deputies of the State Duma flew today to the zone of the conflict. The mission was headed by the chairman of the Committee of Organizing the Work of the Duma, Vladimir Bauer. Those delegations, which were already there, and information which we are receiving, in a one-sided way, it casts light on that conflict. Sending its colleagues to the Northern Caucasus, the Deputy Chamber almost ignored the situation in Chechnya. The Duma refused to examine the draft resolution in which it was suggested to support the initiative of the President aimed at ceasefire and resuming talks. Speaking to deputies of the Duma today was the Chairman of the National Assembly of France, Philippe Séguin. The Russian-Franco communiqué was signed, which provides for experience exchange in legislative work. The need to study the European parliamentary traditions does exist. Today, the Duma again began its session with a tussle. One of the deputies from the LDPR in his speech used the phrase people with specific surnames. Representatives of Russia's choice accused him of anti-Semitism and threatened him with lawsuits. Yesterday's clash was unexpectedly continued at the podium between the deputies of Russia's choice and supporters of Vladimir Zhirinovsky. The deputy, Marachev, came today in a bulletproof vest. Please ask Mr. Gaidar not to attack me today. I'm wearing a bulletproof vest. Today, suggestions were heard not to use microphones in the State Duma to settle personal factional disputes, but these admonitions evidently were not supported by deputies. And again, the serious. A criminal case has been launched in the matter of the attack on Russian military servicemen on the territory of Ingushetia. This was stated today by the acting Prosecutor General of Russia, Alexei Yulushenko. The basis for filing this matter were inquiries conducted by the prosecutor's office on the site of occurrences. Again, it's noted that more than 2,000 local residents, shielded by women and children, blockaded a vehicle convoy of Russian troops at that time under the direction of armed individuals. Some vehicles were turned over, some burned. Soldiers were beaten, and in the same situation was the medical convoy. Women paramedics were also beaten. In the framework of this same criminal case, circumstances are being verified, as stated in the report of the President of Ingushetia, Ruslan Aushev, directed to the Prosecutor General of Russia. Humanitarian aid continues to arrive in Chechnya. Through the Red Cross, doctors have flown out there. Our film crew went along with them to Mozdok. In regions bordering with Chechnya, a calm situation remains, yet hospitals are ready to take in injured, and to the administration of the Stavropol Rim to receive refugees from Chechnya. Funds were allocated, food banks were filled, and the Stavropolya, Krasnodar and Rostov areas are preparing to send cargo with humanitarian aid. Today, a caravan of tractor trailers with foods, cans, and warm clothing left Stavropolya for Chechnya. In the administration of Adygea, information was denied about preparing Adygeian volunteers to support the Dudayev regime. Regarding the dialogue process, the president of Adygea feels that Maikop could be the ideal site for dialogues. Dagestan was and remains a supporter of a peaceful resolution of the Chechen conflict. It was stated at a press conference today in Moscow by representatives of the leadership of the republic. They feel it's enough to strike a match to ignite a fire in the Caucasus, and therefore, to date, Dagestan has attempted to overcome instability in that region. Now, the republic, in any capacity, is ready to participate in peace talks because, in the opinion of the Dagestanis, not all peaceful means or methods have been yet exhausted. We are hopeful that Russian leadership will be able to find and undertake responsible measures so that on Chechen land, on the land of our neighbor, bloodshed will stop and we'll resolve this problem in a peaceful way. Great significance in the political life of Russia was attributed to the visit of the American Vice President Albert Gore. Today, despite the illness of the President of Russia, their meeting did take place. The American Vice President Albert Gore chaired the conclusive meeting of the fourth session of the Russian-American Commission on Economic and Technological Cooperation, but soon after the beginning of the work, Gore and the Russian Prime Minister Viktor Chernomyrdin left for the Central Clinical Hospital, where they were expected by the President of Russia, Boris Yeltsin. The possibility of the meeting between Yeltsin and the American Vice President was stated by the press secretary of our President, and information agencies had reported, but until the very last moment it was not clear whether the conversation would take place. It did take place. The sides discussed a broad circle of questions connected with the development of Russian-American relations and the condition of Boris Yeltsin's health. Gore defined with the Russian word normalna, which means normal. Later, work was continued in the capital presidential hotel. During the session, developed and signed were more than 20 documents. 3 agreements on cooperation in preventing the pollution of the Arctic area, on joint efforts in studying the Earth, and on a system for customs registration of goods being transported in the framework of cooperation in space, and these were signed by the co-chairman of the Commission. The crown of the 2-day work of the Commission was the final press conference. Answering our question, what stages of progress were achieved by the Commission, Gore Chernomyrdin, after the agreement on its creation in Vancouver, the Vice President of the United States said that everything depends on human relations. If people like each other, then matters go smoothly. We've achieved great progress. The next 5th session of the Commission, Gore Chernomyrdin, will take place on the initiative of the Russian side again in Moscow in half a year. As Gore said, we saw the Russian winter. Now we have to come here in summer. Today, the Vice President of the United States left for home. We learned about space prospects from the previous report and about today in the next. Combat calculations of the military space forces at the space station Baikonur are completing for their preparations for the launch rocket Proton Kasa, the satellite Luch. This morning, that was the information that arrived, and later the launch. Today at 1500 hours Moscow time, the rocket Proton, which was launched from Baikonur, took the satellite Luch into orbit. The retranslators of this series, now in space there are 2, are necessary for contact between Flight Control Center and Orbital Station Mir. The matter is that after the collapse of the USSR, part of the earthbound and floating calculating points found themselves outside of Russia, which led to the loss of control over the antiquated station during several hours of each day. From the point of view of safety of the cosmonauts, this is absolutely impermissible. The Luch satellites will reduce the zone of radio silence of the piloted station Mir to a minimum, as specialists of flight control will gain confidence that nothing unexpected will happen in space. And furthermore, in the event of emergency situations, the satellite can be used for urgent telephone conversations of the Russian leadership. On this day, 35 years ago, a resolution was signed by the Ministerial Council to create missile forces of strategic designation. Tomorrow, the 17th of December, missile workers celebrate their holiday. The first warning about missile attacks flying over the ocean and destroying entire cities one may find in the ancient Indian Odysseys, Ramayana and Mahabharata. However, the documentary proof of the existence of first rockets refers to the first millennium before our era. They were used in China for fireworks fireworks and to frighten off evil spirits. 50 years ago, in 1944, the first German combat missile, V1, for London residents became that evil spirit which comes silently and destroys everything. When the Soviet forces seized the secret laboratory where the V1 and V2 were produced, everything which was found there was taken back to the USSR. And the Kovalov Design Office created the first combat missile, R1. It flew only 300 kilometers. The missile R5 in 1956 flew 1,200 and carried a nuclear warhead. In 1957, the intercontinental missile R7 flew 6,500 kilometers in half an hour. It, under the peaceful name Vostok, carried into orbit the first experimental satellite. The birthday of the Missile Forces of Strategic Designation, in brief RVSN, was 1959. Missile forces today and in the foreseen future are the basis of the military power of Russia. On the territory of the Federation, currently there are 750 launching installations, and throughout the CIS, 970. Half of them are in mines. The rest are either on mobile or ground launching installations or on railway ones. Pursuant to the agreements on decreasing aggressive weapons START 1 and START 2 by the year 2003, all missile complexes with divisible main components will be liquidated, and the liquidation of the group of strategic weapons outside of Russia will be completed. About the fate of the Black Sea Fleet, today at the session of the Federative Council, the Deputy Gonchar suggested an appeal be adopted to the presidents of Russia and Ukraine to change the approach to the problem of the Black Sea Fleet and the naval forces of Ukraine. The Federative Council sent an appeal to the presidents of the two countries. And now about a peaceful but exhausting war among various draft laws. For example, only on the draft laws on civil service, they are being examined for 3 years. And today the first meeting of the Council on Judiciary Reform under the President was held. The aim is to find a compromise and expedite legislative work. One of the reasons why there are not many new laws today in Russia is, as they say, on the same topic, there are always several drafts in existence. And between those who prepare the drafts, there's a rivalry. For example, in competition are 3 versions of the Criminal Procedural Code of Russia, and there is no end in sight to that battle. That's why, by decree of the President, a Council on Judicial Reform was formed. Speaking at its first meeting today, the head of the administration of the President, Sergei Filatov, noted that it's necessary to remove all impediments to the expeditious advance of reforms, which are impossible without new laws in that sphere. Among the Council are prominent scientists, jurists, prosecutors, staff members, judicial organs, and the Ministry of Internal Affairs. One of the objectives of the Council is that it must take on the coordination of draft laws or preparation of draft laws and reduce alternatives to draft laws and preserve the wholeness of the entire system of this power, and hence facilitate the effective implementation of reform in our country. The Council will give the President proposals on various draft laws, and the President, on his part, as it says in his greeting, which was read today by Sergei Filatov, promised to consider its opinion. In the greeting, it's emphasized the great significance of that work to build a democratic and lawful country. The Ministry of Internal Affairs for some time has been complaining about the shortcomings in the laws, but continues to apprehend criminals. This morning, information agencies reported an appeal of the Petersburg law enforcement organs to combine their efforts with all corresponding services of the CIS and Interpol to find ancient manuscripts stolen from the Russian National Library. By evening, news arrived. All 90 ancient Western European and Eastern philosophical texts stolen last Saturday night are already in the safes of the St. Petersburg Department of the FSK. The thieves were also found, but in the interests of the investigation, no information is being publicized. It seems that it's even more difficult to find out where money disappears to allocate it to the victims of the earthquake in the South Kuril Islands. Our program had already once spoken about this, and today again. Not minimizing all that has been done for the liquidation of the repercussions of the earthquake in the South Kuril Islands, but we won't negate real facts either, which can't confirm in any way the high effectiveness of that aid. On paper, already 179 billion rubles have been allocated from the federal treasury to the victims of the disaster, not speaking of the significant currency donations from foreign countries. But why, then, is there no money to prepay for ships loaded up in Banyana with construction technology so needed in the Kurils? Why, with interruptions and not in the volumes promised by government, is compensation being paid to the victims? 500 tons of sugar, 20 tons of butter, 350 50,000 various cans of fish and meat conserves supposedly sent to the islands. But why then, apart from the 8,000 rubles per bottle of dry milk and stale coffee and tea and 3-liter jars of undated tomato preserves, there's nothing else to be bought in Shkotanino. During these days, yet another High Commission from the State Duma and the government is at work in the district, sorting out it with the Kuril affairs. It'd be very desirable that the trip of these respectful figures to the islands lost in the ocean, devastated by disaster, should not become yet another excursion for bureaucrats, tires of the tussles in the capital. And after their visit, the Kuril residents and Kuril Islands would receive some real help. The State Commission of Statistics of Russia stated that prices in Russia since the beginning of December increased by 6.7%. The President of the Russian Federation, Boris Nikolaevich Yeltsin, signed a decree today on the functioning of the Republican, federal, and territorial funds for social support for the population. Today, many need aid, but the government can't do everything. The process of forming non-governmental pension funds has acquired a landslide nature. In 1992, there was only one such facility. Today, there are 479 licensed funds. Will they function successfully in our interests? This question remains open. Probably one can't consider sufficient those pensions which are received by our veterans today, barely enough for a modest existence. Deputies of the government are attempting to increase subsidies, but in the Treasury there's not enough money. And yet today there is a possibility to take concern in advance for one's old age. In Russia, non-government pensions funds are beginning to operate actively. However, to reach an agreement for supplementary pension support can be done only by companies which firmly stand on their feet. In the country there are still few. For example, clients of one of the largest funds, Interrosdostoinstva, are Aeroflot, the Manufacturing Association GPZ1, and certain other firms. Now, their employees have personal accounts with special deposits made. The size of the pension will depend on the size of contributions. The government supports the development of a system of non-governmental pension support, and in the Duma, a draft law is being prepared on the operations of such funds. In the draft law, principles are embedded to diversify the assets of the funds because the funds must be conservative investors, their portfolio must be most reliable. And those already retired can now increase their revenues by approaching, for example, the National Pension Bank. Here, veterans are offered consultations and aid. The minimum sum of deposit is only 50,000, and for pensioners there are special discounts. Monthly, there's a 9.5% interest added to the balance on the sum deposited, and if the client of the bank dies, the relatives will receive a ritual subsidy equivalent to the government's. If needed, elderly clients can be serviced within their homes. Contemporary equipment helps to protect deposits. There was even concern for those who have difficulty signing. A machine will help them. The main premise here is that each person, thickness of wallet notwithstanding, should not feel abandoned. And the government should develop a system of control over pension funds. Moscow has assessed the Karadzic plan on regularizing the Bosnian crisis as an attempt to avoid work to implement the peace plan from the International Contact Group, which includes Russia, the United States, and Eastern and the European Union countries. The United States, with previous skepticism, sees the new initiative of the Bosnian Serbs and expect real deeds to substantiate their proposals. This was stated by an official representative of the American State Department, commenting on the proposal of the leader of the Bosnian Serbs, Radovan Karadzic, although he admitted that they truly could be to the benefit of the Bosnian people. The American President Bill Clinton delivered an address to the country in which he expounded on changes in the financial policy of his administration. This address was a forced response to the changes in the moods of the electorate, which had led to the devastating defeat of the Democrats at the November congressional elections. And yet many observers expressed doubt that the measures proposed could lead to a significant shift in the political sympathies of Americans. In the small French town Aix-en-Provence, another Franco-Italian summit is underway. The basic questions being discussed at the meeting will be economic and military cooperation in the framework of the project Euroforce, which involves France, Italy, and Spain. However, the beginning of the meeting was darkened by news of an explosion in front of the Italian consulate in Marseille and news from Paris that the 78-year-old François Mitterrand has a progressive form of cancer, and doctors insist that he resign before the imminent presidential elections. Official Paris, however, has not yet confirmed that report. As we have already announced, on the territory of Windsor Castle, the oldest suburban residence of the British monarchs, there are significant deposits of oil. Alexander Malikov reports from London. There are no castles without treasures, that's in stories, but that a castle should stand on a treasure, such occurs only in real life. For 4 years in a row, the Canadian company Cannock has been convincing the Queen that under Windsor Castle and its adjacent parks there is a sediment of black gold. The worth was assessed more than $1.5 billion. The underground oil deposit in Welf is only behind the deposit found in Dorset County 20 years ago. In the beginning of the next month, such bowing mules, as these mechanical pumps are called by drillers, may appear near the walls of the castle between the private golf course and the cricket court. They apparently will not ruin the scenery, as it may seem on the screen as you see now, but their appearance is complicated by the procedure of receiving a permit for boring from the building department in Berkshire County, where the charming town Windsor is located. Despite the fact that black gold will be sought on the plot of land between the castle and the Thames River on the private land of the Queen, according to the law from 1939, oil, prior to being pumped, becomes the property of the Crown, that is, the government. And although, of course, something will go into the Canadian oil workers' pockets, who hope that they will be more successful than their American colleagues from the state of Oklahoma, who secretly looked for oil on the train of the legendary Robin Hood in Sherwood Forest. If, in the beginning of January, the Canadian oil company Cannock is permitted to experimentally drill near Windsor Castle, and 2 months later will derive the first oil, then at the London filling pumps, possibly, the name of a new competitive firm will appear. The world is already preparing for the Christmas and New Year holidays. The Orthodox Christmas, as you know, falls on the 7th of January, and the Catholic one is on the 25th of December. Have a look how they're preparing for it in the White House in Washington. One of the responsibilities of the President of the United States is to support a tradition in the country and in his White House. This year, however, Christmas decorations emphasize the personal aspect. Not just the President lives here, but Bill and Hillary Clinton. To see how the White House is decorated inside, such an opportunity is not offered frequently, especially since this time the theme of the decoration is the favorite melody of the Clinton family. The 12 Days of Christmas, a traditional song. What gifts have loving hearts prepared for each other for the holiday? The answer to this is probably on the main tree of the White House, a Colorado 6-meter pine. It was decorated on the First Lady's request by school children. We'll celebrate Christmas here with the entire family, says Hillary. Gold and red tones, her favorites. And this is Bill Clinton's favorite house. It's made out of gingerbread with chocolate, 28 kilograms. A precise copy of the home of the president in the state of Arkansas, where he spent his childhood. His German shepherd, called King, is made of marzipan. In the president's real house, there are 12 Christmas trees. They'll be seen by dignified guests at the Christmas balls and receptions. Such an invitation is a pass to the higher society of Washington. In a house which has seen many presidents, today the favorite music of the Clinton family is heard. In response to our mercantile question, we heard the White House is decorated by volunteers. Not a cent from taxpayers' money was spent on this. Hello. Today in the Stadium Luzhniki and the Army Sports Palace, the first matches of the traditional and now 27th hockey tournament for the newspaper Izvestia Prize open. The tournament was opened by the teams of Italy and Finland. The match was extremely stubborn. Incidentally, we're already used to the fact that at the tournament of any level in the first games, even outsiders fight for every single point. However, the Finns' class was quite high. They won with a score of 2-0 because of the 2 goals of Pelton. In another match, which was held today, also a dry score was recorded. The Czech Republic, Norway, 5-0. The first game at the Izvestia tournament was not easy for the Russian team either. Mistaken were those who earlier felt that the match with the French team would be easy. Russians had to fight back twice, and only in the end of the second period they evened the score, 2-2, and then went ahead. In the third, in the 20 minutes, the Russian team conducted easily, confidently with 4 more goals, the result 7-2. In the evening, the teams of Sweden and Switzerland met. The Swedes also had a difficult time after the second period. The score was 2-2. As a result, result. However, they did win 7-3. At the regular level of the World Cup in the downhill skiing, a small sensation occurred on the speed decline in the French Val d'Isère. A victory was held by the Austrian User Strobel, who was in 70th place. Leading in the overall tally of the World Cup among the men is the Alberto Tombo from Italy. And also in France, the world level of freestyle tournament was held. Serious ambitions in the season were confirmed by the Russian Sergei Shubletsov, who was victorious in the mogul competitions. And that's probably it. We've told you about the main events of the day, and we've even showed you some ads, but for us, an event today was the return of our name, the program Time. What was your reaction? Well, we learned one point of view. I think that you will be accused of having regressed into the past, but I think that this is a return to common sense and sobriety of thought, because the news, after all, is a bureaucratic newspaper name. It's without an identity, the news. And behind this word, you don't see the broad picture of the life of the entire world. But time is time. Behind it stands everything. You're listening to the music of the great Russian composer Georgy Vasilievich Sviridov. It was composed for the film Time Forward, and since the first edition, it would introduce the program Time. Today we congratulate Georgy Vasilievich on his birthday. And our team thanks all of you for your attention. We wish you more peaceful times ahead. At the editor's desk today are our directors Galina Vishneva and Tatiana Petrovskaya, and they helped on the team to produce the first broadcast Time in 1968. Goodbye. Good evening. According to the Oceanic Meteorological Center, the north and northwestern areas of the European top part of Russia tomorrow will be in the zone of heightened atmospheric pressure, which is shifting from an anticyclone over Siberia. Partly cloudy skies are expected without precipitation only on the coast of the Barents Sea. There will be inclement weather with snow and snow blizzards. In the Nenetsk Autonomous District, in the Republic of Komi, and in the Arkhangelsk District, minus 15 to 20 degrees. In Karelia, minus 12 to 17. On the Kola Peninsula, minus 6 to 11 degrees. The Baltic countries and the Kaliningrad district, there it will be cloudy with some isolated precipitation during the day, 0 plus 5. The cyclone over the central Volga will define the weather in the east of the central region and in the pre-Ural region. In that region, cloudy with snow and blizzards and icy road conditions and snow drifts, minus 13 to 18. In Tataria and the Orenburg district, minus 7 to 11 degrees. Belarus, Ukraine, Moldova, the Rostov district, the northern regions of the Krasnodar and Stavropol, Remeriesk, the Kalmykia area, will be in a belt of high pressure. Here it will be partly cloudy, without significant precipitation at night, minus 1 to 6, during the day, minus 2 plus 3. In the south of Kalmykia, in the Krasnodar, Stavropol, Remeriesk, in the northern Caucasus republics, in the zone of an atmospheric front, the clouds will cover the skies. There will be isolated wet snow with icy roads and possible wet snow accumulation on electrical lines. Temperatures 0 minus 5. Beyond the Caucasus, cloudy with some isolated rain and snow. On the Black Sea coast, plus 1 to 6. In Georgia, plus 6 to 8 degrees. In Armenia, minus 3 plus 2. And significantly warmer in Azerbaijan, plus 10 to 15 degrees. In St. Petersburg, partly cloudy skies without significant precipitation at night, minus 13 to 15, during the day, minus 10 to 12 degrees. In Moscow, partly cloudy skies with some light snow. The 17th of December in the fall calendar is St. Barbara's Day. And when Barbara's out, cover up your nose and ears. In the capital, it will be cold at night, minus 18 to 20, during the day, minus 14 to 16. That completes our broadcast. I wish you a good rest on the weekend. Goodbye.